We've got a rain day today, so we're going to have a crack at the first section of paneling on the Ultima. I've been through and given everything a good vacuum and made sure I've wiped everything down, and also just run some tape where I need to try and protect things. That'll be a bit of an iterative process just to make sure that you've got everything protected and you don't have any swarf, which, you know, then you're going to lean on, which is going to scratch the paint and all that sort of thing. So definitely cleanliness is going to be next to godliness in that sense. I've unpacked the first box, which is involves the rear bulkhead panel, and you've got the front bulkhead and the rack section. They're all labeled pretty well, but just make sure you don't get confused and get the wrong panel. You know, there's the rear bulkhead panel as distinct from the engine bay rear bulkhead panel, and they are different. So you don't want to be cutting to the same, or, you know, having one that you've clearanced in a certain way and then you try to install it in the other one's place. So be careful of that stuff. Other than that, you need to just make sure that you actually mark on these panels which way they're orientated when you actually do your drilling and cutting. So when you put the sealant down, you don't try and install it in the wrong direction and then run into a massive cleanup job, because the sealant's basically the most noxious shit on the planet and it's a pain to clean up. Now, the order in which you do these, I've been told, is pretty much as described in the instruction manual, which you have an online version. And also someone was kindly enough to give me an older Evo version, which doesn't directly apply, but is also a good reference or a double check. They're not actually the same. The RS version's meant to have been updated and be slightly better, but there might be a few additional tips that are available in this, and I can make notes on the hard copy, which is quite nice. I've marked up the first panel and I've started to drill out a few of the holes. I thought it might be an opportune time just to talk about some of the tools that I'm using and the method that I'm using. Noting that I'm not really someone who has a lot of experience when it comes to paneling, but I did do a bit of research and stole some ideas off some of the other builders that seemed like they made sense to me. One thing that I would say is that there are a few things like, you know, the electric rivet gun that I've got that aren't absolutely necessary, but I always think that if you get tired of a job halfway through, you tend to lose concentration and the end product ends up being, you know, rubbish because you lose a bit of care. So I'm not going to tackle this paneling in one go, and I'm going to try and use some tools that make life a bit easier, which means that I should be able to concentrate and get a better product in the end. I've drilled out this 1 meter ruler at 30mm intervals, so I can use that as a template, which should make things a bit faster. I've also just got things like, there's a contour gauge that I got. This one's just a cheap one. I don't know how good a quality it's going to be. You can get metal ones which are much finer adjustment and certainly a better tool. Paint pen, Chinograph pencil, I think they're called something else now because the old ones probably gave you cancer or something. Permanent marker, and just a pen because it can give you a fine tip, you know, to use as a measurement point. Obviously you've got a center punch. Every time you think that you should or maybe you shouldn't use one, just use one, because you're going to end up having your drill run out and not end up getting an accurate hole. Obviously a tape measure. This is called a rivet fan, which again you can just use to get equidistant spacing for all your rivet holes. Obviously a set of calipers is imperative, and, you know, a hammer and these quick grip clamps, which are about $30 for a pack. You can usually get a couple in, they're really good. I like to just go through the diagrams and just sort of tick things off as I get them done to make sure that I haven't missed anything, because the worst thing that happens is that you get it in the car and then you're trying to measure and get it to work right. A small body drill is a bit of a no-brainer. It just means that you can get into tighter corners and that sort of stuff without it being a pain. Some wax seal, which is what you spray into holes after you've drilled them in the chassis, so you don't get any corrosion later. That's the bond and seal that we'll be using. I'll definitely need to get a couple more tubes of that, just because I assume it's going to dry out and I don't have time to use it continually. The factory actually gives you a whole heap of fixings. I don't know whether there's going to be enough. They even give you some skin pins, which are basically just panel pins that enable you to put a panel in place and then drill out the remaining holes. Then if we go over here, here's a couple of the optional tools that I've got. This one here is an electric caulking gun. It has adjustment there, so you can actually set the speed of it, which means that, you know, you'll have either a thin bead or a thick bead. Again, if you've ever used a caulking gun for an extended period of time, your hand gets cramped and you just end up having an inconsistent bead thickness. With this, lots of the strength of the panel does come through the adhesive, when it's and sort of having a uniform thickness along the panel is going to mean that you're going to have consistent adhesion and consistent strength through the panel, which is good. This is my electric rivet gun. Again, it wasn't the cheapest thing in the world, but I figured if I'm doing something like 2,500 rivets, I'm going to get pretty over it by the end of it. It also catches all of the dead soldiers in the back there, which is pretty useful because you're not going to be, you know, treading on them or marking the paint because they're rolling around everywhere, or you drive over them and kill $1,000 worth of tires or whatever you've got floating around. So yeah, look, that's it for the start of the paneling. I'll try and get a bit of a video of me installing it and putting it into place, but the paneling is going to take an extended period of time, and it's probably going to be pretty boring to watch. So that's the method that I'm going to use. I might do an update to just sort of show the paneling as it starts to go in, and give any tips that I've sort of discovered along the way, but the rest of the video will probably just be a bit of a time lapse with a couple of tips here and there. If you have any questions, drop them down below. Just to explain what these skin pins are and how they work, you can see that there's just a couple of prongs there that slide over a center shaft, and then you push it through the panel, you release it with these pliers, and they slide back over and just pull the two panels together. What you need to do is, in a minimum of 3 places, secure any of the panels together, because then that deals with any errors that you could have between just one instance where you've done a marking and drilled a hole. That way, when you've got 3, obviously the third one wouldn't align if the first 2 weren't accurate. So that's the best way I've been doing it. The other thing I've been doing is just marking a center line. I don't know whether you can see it just there through those holes, and that sort of just confirms as we move along that I've actually got all of those pins in place, and that we're not going to have any misalignment when it comes to all of these rivets, which, you know, some of these are going to be covered in carpet, and it's only my OCD that it's important to, but, you know, especially if you're going to have any exposed, it'd just look very budget if you didn't get this stuff, you know, together properly. Okay, I'm just clearancing these panels just so they fit around the roll bars in the car. What it shows in the sheet here is that it says an 8mm radius on these corners. So what I'm doing is I've traced it out just using an 8mm drill bit, and then I've cut it out as best as I can just with some tin snips. But I don't want to obviously go too far or bend the material, so look, I'm sort of just taking probably more time and care than is, you know, necessary, but I'm just filing it down to fit, just using a square file and then a round file to match up to that 8mm corner. Obviously going slower is the way to go there, and just, you know, test fit the panel a couple of times if you need to. It's a lot harder to put the material back on, I'd imagine, than it is just to take it off, and you've done all this work drilling out the panel as it is, so you don't want to have to start again by getting a new panel. It is just aluminium panel, so I guess worst case is you could start again, but it'd be quite frustrating. So go slow, be careful, and you'll get a good end finish. So what I've done here is I'm just using a set square just to see how far above or below the alignment is on the top of this panel. You can see there's about a 1mm gap there, so what we need to do is we need to take that out down the bottom there. And there's 1mm, and just incrementally approach that just so that that sits flush with the top of that roll bar, which is the instruction. So we'll do that, and then we'll also just mark around the back here to make sure that the holes that we're going to drill, you can see the pilot holes there for the shifter cable and the handbrake cable, are going to make sure that they clear everything and they're going to have enough space there to move. I thought I'd just take the opportunity to explain what I'm doing here and why deburring is important. Basically, the reason deburring is important, which is just removing a minor amount of material from the holes that you've drilled with your drill bit, is because what happens when you have burrs there is when you push the panel against its mounting point, you know, the chassis in this case, if you have little bits of metal in there, what happens is that over time, fatigue and vibration will actually wear away those bits of metal, and you'll end up having a panel that's not perfectly seated to its mating surface, and then that'll either vibrate or it won't provide the strength that's required from this system of riveting with sealing, which obviously comes from the aircraft industry. And just on that, the tool that I'm using is called a microstop. It was recommended to me by another builder. The main thing when you're deburring is you can do it with a big drill bit or a deburring tool, but it's quite a painful process and it takes a lot of time. So what this does is this speeds it up a lot. This is virtually just a depth gauge. It has a nylon tip so it doesn't mark anything, and a 120-degree cutter. That little pilot bit at the end there fits perfectly in the 1/8 inch pilot holes that you've drilled. And then you just run along with your drill and just run this will actually stay stationary, and you just run the bit down and you'll just get a very uniform deburring of the hole. You don't want to remove any more material than you absolutely have to, because obviously that affects the strength of the panel, but you want to be able to do it fairly quickly and accurately. This one comes from Aircraft Engineers store. It was about 120 Australian dollars. The bits actually came from a place in the US called Brown Tool, I think. and I think I got 2 or 3 bits for, you know, $60 or $80. So for the sake of $200, when you got 2,500 rivets, it's really a bit of a no-brainer, and it should mean that, like I say, you're going to end up with the maximum strength from your paneling, which is as intended. Like I say, it comes from the aircraft industry, so those guys are obviously very interested in stuff like making sure that all of the edges and stuff like that are very smooth, so you don't have any sharp points or anything, which actually foster fatigue and crack propagation in any particular panel. So here are the panels in position, and I know I said this would be a whole lot of time lapse with a few little tips here and there, but that hasn't come about. The main reason for that is it just takes a lot of time getting these panels in position, and I want to make sure that this video doesn't go forever. One thing to be aware of is that you need clearance there for the seat belts. The rivet lines do follow the 10mm from the bottom, 30mm from the top rationale of this rear panel, and you can't get these panels in position initially to mark where you get, for example, the steering support bracket here. So what you need to do is you need to measure that carefully. The contour gauge can come in handy there, and just incrementally sort of trim that out so you get it in the right position. I test fitted this panel half a dozen or 8 times, and each time you've got to carefully install it and then take it out of the car. So that's the way I've attacked it. I've radiused everything where I possibly can to make sure that it neatly fits around the bars. I'm sure you could just straight cut it if you want it to be a bit lazy, but that's kind of defeats the purpose of a car that's like this. Then also where you've just got to trim around wells, I've just taken that away with a file, and then also just chamfered it back towards the angle of the weld just to clear it there. So there are a lot of these little things that just take a lot of time, and it's very important to get right, because I think all of the small things will add up to a very good end product. So I'll try not to waste too much more time talking about it in this video. The next video I'll sort of cover some of the final paneling, and I'll also talk about some of the insulation, because insulation in this car, they do get very, very hot. And it's important because they're so noisy, because you have a V8 directly behind your head, that you get sound deadening in and acoustic liner and heat shielding and all these other things. So I'll run through all of that and which ones are the best, you know, everything from $100 gold tape to you know, cheap sound deadening. The guys who have this stuff listed on the car builders website actually have really good tech data on all their stuff, so that was part of the reason why I chose them. And I'll explain, you know, how that's installed and where it's installed. But for the moment, thanks for watching. I'll not bore you any further.